Hello, church. I hope you are enjoying Gentle and Lowly so far. Let's dive into chapter 3, the happiness of Christ. Dane starts here with a quote from Hebrews 12:2, "For the joy that was set before him." And as he is giving us the words of Thomas Goodwin, who a lot of this book is based upon, he starts with a sentence that he found in his writings there, and it says, "Christ's own joy, comfort, happiness, and glory are increased and enlarged by," and then he asks, how would you finish that sentence? Maybe you can pause the video right here and think about how you might finish that sentence. Now that you're back, he finishes it like this: "Christ's own joy, comfort, happiness, and glory are increased and enlarged by," and here's a surprising answer, "by his showing grace and mercy in pardoning, relieving, and comforting his members here on earth." And so this chapter is all about how God, or through Christ, is filled with joy in forgiving sinners of their sins. And this is such an amazing concept. It seems almost backwards to us that God would be happy about bringing forgiveness and comfort to those who are in need of forgiveness. He says on page 37, he wants us to draw on his grace and mercy because it is who he is. He drew near to us in the incarnation so that his joy and ours could rise and fall together. His in giving mercy and ours and receiving it. Goodwin, who he quotes again, even goes on and so far as to say that Christ gets more joy and comfort than we do when we come to him for help and mercy. His own translation of that says, "When you come to Christ for mercy and love and help in your anguish and perplexity and sinfulness, you are going with the flow of his deepest wishes and not against them." You see, he wants, in the words of Dane once again, he wants to draw strength. He wants us to draw strength from his love. But the only ones qualified to do so are sinners in need of undeserved love. And he doesn't just want us to be forgiven, he wants us. It's such an amazing thing that us being drawn to God, to Christ, being forgiven by him, brings him more joy than it brings us. And that's amazing because I don't know about you, but the amount of joy that I feel when I know that God loves me despite my sinfulness is huge. And so we are going to discuss, I'm here with Pastor Todd and with Pastor Brian, who both have read this chapter, and we're just going to have a little discussion here to help you to digest this chapter a little bit more, and a pre-discussion before you go on to discuss with your small group. And so my first question to you guys is, I was really taken back by this quote from Goodwin. It says, "Christ's own joy, comfort, happiness, and glory are increased and enlarged by his showing grace and mercy and pardoning, relieving, and comforting his members here on earth." And if this is true, why do you think that a lot of people might have an opposite view of Christ? That he's disappointed in us when we sin, and that he's just kind of like offering forgiveness because, well, I'll offer this to you, but Dane says that he's joyful about that. Yeah. So why do you think we might have an opposite view of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful question. I think part of the reason that it strikes me as kind of the opposite of the way I would respond is, or the way that I would think Jesus would respond is because it's opposite the way I usually respond. And so, yeah, when my kids sin and come to me, or somebody else sins against me, I'm not usually thinking like, oh, this is so great, I get to forgive them now for what they've done. Like there's some bitterness or some anger or some frustration that kind of, it can prevent me from joyfully forgiving them. And so, yeah, just thinking about how Jesus is sinless and he doesn't have any of that junk in his heart that I have in my heart. It just he's just like so ready and eager to forgive, and it gives him joy. It just blows my mind.
I think it's a great question too. And one of the things that I was considering is why is that, that we resist that sometimes in our own minds. And for me, I think some of it was thinking about, again, like family and child type stuff, and picturing when you have that very young child, 4 or 5-year-old, or even maybe in the 12s where they're trying something new and they're messing up on it, or they really screwed up bad or whatever, and they're coming to you, it's pretty easy to be gentle. It's pretty easy to just mercy. Oh, don't worry about it. It's like the first time you tried that, right? This is good. Go ahead. And so you have that kind of compassion. But when you have that 20-year-old who's doing something that they should have learned at 12, it changes, right? You kind of have expectations. So I think there's a tendency in my own heart to sometimes put those expectations in God's heart. And I think, well, Lord, I've been growing with you for this long. I've been a Christian this long or whatever. And so I'm thinking, how disappointed he's going to be in me. I should be here. I should be this. And so it makes it a lot harder for me to then approach him. But I have to remember, that my 5 years with him might be like that 1 hour for the 12-year-old who tried it for the first time. He still sees me as this very young, very immature, needing so much growth. And if I remember he has that picture towards me, it makes it easier. That's where that grace and mercy is like, yes, come on. I've got the big picture in mind here. Come on, keep coming.
That's right.
Instead of this disappointment of...
Yeah. And I feel like Jesus, because he's full in himself, like he doesn't need anything from us. I feel like that allows him to give fully. 'Cause like there is a cost to forgiving, which his cost was he died on the cross. Right. But he's so full in himself that he's overflowing, and he's able to give just wave and wave of grace and forgiveness, where I'm limited. And I feel like I often think when I need to forgive somebody for something, my first response is usually about myself and how this has affected me. Where Jesus, he's so filled up in himself that, he's just overflowing and can just respond to you out of that fullness, which is amazing.
Yeah. I think, Brian, like what you said, like when somebody sins against you, there's kind of a bitterness or something. I think there's a sting in the surprise, right? Like somebody comes to you and says like, hey, I did this. And you're just hearing about it for the first time. And with God, it's different than that, right? So he knows what we are going to do before we even do it.
That's right.
And so I think of like my kids, this isn't particularly my child, but say your kid draws on the wall, and like you knew they drew on the wall, but they don't know that you know that they drew on the wall. And when they come to you and say like, hey Dad, I drew on the wall, I'm really sorry. Like you're so ready to forgive because you've already know what they did.
Yeah.
You see the results of it, like you've already kind of dealt with that, and now you're waiting for them to come and to confess to you and to ask for your forgiveness, and you're so quick to say, like, yes, I'll forgive you. Like, thank you for being honest. Whereas when your kid comes to you and says like, well, I don't know who did it. Like, it must have just happened by itself, or or they come up with some elaborate story. aliens came and they broke in and they drew on the wall, and you're just like, and like so it's so disappointing. And I think if we can shift our mentality to like, that's God. Like he knows what we've done. He's already fixed it through Jesus on the cross, and he's just waiting for us to come to him so that he can joyfully offer us forgiveness. And of course, Dane gives us the story of the doctor who has like his tools set up, and he's ready to like help people with their diseases, and everybody's like, nah, we'll take care of it ourselves. I got a big cut, I'll put a Band-Aid on it. And a few guys go to the doctor and say like, hey, we really need help. And he's excited to help them because that's what he's there for. Now, if this is true, if God does find joy in that, how can we as Christians reflect better Jesus' heart towards sinners and towards failures in people's lives and in our own lives? How can we better reflect Jesus in our reaction to either hearing the news of somebody we don't know, or somebody coming to us and confessing a sin to us? How can we reflect Jesus in that situation?
Yeah, I think a couple things come to mind. I think saying that Jesus is happy to forgive us and increases his joy to pardon our sin and to comfort us isn't the same thing as saying that he doesn't grieve our sin. I think our sin does grieve God,
right?
But it doesn't prevent him then from forgiving and enjoying this gift that he bought. And I think that's one of the main ways where we're kind of so different than God, is that sometimes in my sinfulness, my response to someone else's failure can actually be a little bit of, like I can take a little bit of joy in that. It's like the opposite, where, yeah, I'm taking joy in the fact that this person fell, and now that makes me feel a little bit better. Like I'm not as bad as this person. And so like, yeah, I feel like that's completely opposite from Jesus. But then on another side of it also, I think the way we respond is pointing people to how Jesus responds, which is one of, I want to forgive you, come to me. And it's not kind of holding people to, some standard that we're creating, but it's kind of creating a culture of humility where we're like, this is why Christ died. In one sense, it's not surprising that you've sinned, like helping people to know that, and then leading them and pointing them to the cross again and again and again. I feel like that's one of the ways that we could respond.
That's really good.
Yeah, I'm reminded in what you said, is Paul says in Romans, shall we continue to sin that grace may abound?
Yeah.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
And so even though Christ is joyfully offering us forgiveness, he doesn't get more joy like if we just go out and sin so that he can have joy in forgiving us. That's kind of a weird way to look at it. It's the fact that as we try to serve Christ and we fail, he finds joy in restoring us back to the narrow path and walking in tandem with him.
Yeah, that's right.
Really good.
Well, church, we would love to talk about this chapter. There were so many wonderful things. If you look, you'll find some more discussion questions that you can discuss with your group. And we'll see you in chapter 4 for some more discussion time and some more just encouraging edification from Dane Ortland.